head of the Australian spy agency ASIO is warning that foreign spies are using Tinder and other dating apps to recruit people with access to sensitive government secrets. Mike Burgess made the revelation in his annual threat assessment. He also warned that extremist messaging around pandemic restrictions risk pushing people towards violence. Katya Theodorakis is the head of counterterrorism at the Australian Strategic Policy Institute and joins us now. Hi, Katya. Thanks for being with us. So there were a few elements to Mike Burgess's speech overnight. What stood out for you?
Yeah, there were quite a few really interesting angles there. One of them was that he again picked up on a point that he made last year, where he said the threats are not just to life, but also to our way of life. And I think that's quite an extraordinary thing to say for the Director General of an organization that's tasked with protecting our security. I think he should be commended for drawing our attention to that, because I think it shows that there's an understanding that violent extremism is a broader phenomenon, or extremism in general. And as he mentioned, ASIO is at the very pointy end. They're tasked with preventing threats. They're tasked with our security. And he said, look, there's more the community can do. And that also includes, he didn't say it explicitly, but I would read that into his statement, that threats to our way of life. That also has to do with things where we're not just sort of looking out in the community going, oh, who could be a spy? Who could be a potential terrorist? It's also, extremism is political, and it doesn't always lead to violence, but it kind of undermines the democratic values. It undermines our pluralistic order. And I think those things, those warning signs in those areas, it's also really important to look at that. And the fact that he drew attention to that, I think, is very significant.
Yeah, he did say that the threat of espionage and foreign interference has now overtaken terrorism as his organisation's principal security concern, was how he put it. Of course, there's a federal election coming up. How vulnerable is our democratic process to manipulation from overseas players?
Yeah, I think it always is, and I think it's really important to recognize what that actually means, and how it can, very, very inconspicuous things can lead to that. It's not your cloak and dagger activity. I think that we have to watch out for, but that certain narratives or even just certain ideas may be just injected into a very, very seemingly pluralistic thread on Telegram or on Twitter, where people, they just put ideas in there, and they're not sort of hostile to begin with, saying, you should bring down your government and have an insurrection like they had in Washington. It might be more very subtle things that make people, they undermine the legitimacy of government in a democratic process, or they might make people feel that there is no political way to express their grievances, or that democracy doesn't work, or that, the government's racist, whatever those things. And all those things work best, of course, when there's a seed of truth in them. So it's quite subtle. And I think that's the kind of stuff that we need to watch out for too.
Okay, just looking at the dating app line, Katya, which obviously has grabbed the headlines today.
Of course.
This is part of foreign intelligence using the internet for recruitment efforts. This is approaching people on social media, in other words, including dating apps.
Yeah.
How's this being done?
I don't know. I could only imagine. And I think, everyone's imagination would be running quite wild there. So, when you're in a dating app, you're giving a part of you away and having discussions with people that's quite personal. And people can use that, and it may not even to recruit you, but if you work in a place that's interesting, they may just want some information from you that to you seems quite random that you would give to a person that you're starting to have a connection with, because they may just ask an question, but so what are your colleagues like? And you may inadvertently give something away where that's information that can then help them to do something else. It may not always be that really dramatic action, but I think it's through making connections, your classic honeypot. Someone that gains your trust and, gives you, when you're in a dating app, you're showing that you have a void in your life of some way, or that you need, not a void in a bad sense, but you're out there, you're looking for something, and that can be used, and it's through conversations. begin with.
He also spoke, Katya, about the effect that COVID lockdowns and restrictions have had. Many more people spending more time at home, online. And he said that the pandemic has sent online radicalisation into, quote, overdrive. What kinds of radicalism have had the biggest boost, in your view?
I think it's what I would call anti-government radicalism or extremism. Security agencies in Germany, for example, they have actually added that as an official category to the types of extremism they monitor, and they have drawn attention to that in their annual threat assessment in their report. And that's the really interesting element of it, that I think there has been sort of it's become a lot broader. You don't have to become a member of a certain organization with a very strict sort of delineated ideological program. There's a movement out there now, and it's very broad. But overall, it's shifting in a way that is hostile against government, and larger parts of it could be quite willing to use violence. And I think even the ones that don't, they may already think that it's not just legitimate, but it may actually be needed, that someone does something to shake up this status quo. I mean, there's so many people now in this movement that believe that we have a genocidal government, and there should be at least a Nuremberg-style trial, if not a hanging, or and there's also movement within the movement where people are saying no, we shouldn't do that. So there's a lot of there are dynamic factors at play, but I would be looking to that. And of course, it has its elements of right-wing extremist groups working in that. But as the Director General pointed out, that normal spectrum that we had, that we're used to, of right-wing, left-wing extremism, that political spectrum, that's not useful anymore, because it sort of overlaps. It's quite a fluid movement, and it kind of crisscrosses between boundaries. And someone who could support a very right-wing point can also be part of an organization that has a bit more of a sort of what we traditionally knew as a left-wing agenda, with a left-wing sort of more horizontal organization. So I think that's why he was making that statement. It's a new type that's formed.
Katya Theodorakis, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me.